a mass shooting or a train explosion similar to those in Madrid and London, but bloody public murder with knives, swords or machetes. That's the kind of attack, not unlike the murder of soldier Lee Rigby on a London street last May, that Australia's counter-terrorism authorities are believed to have been acting to stop through Australia's biggest ever counter-terror raids today. The ABC has been told that the direction to carry out the attack came directly from the self-described Islamic State in Iraq. The alleged plan was to snatch random members of the public off the street and behead them on camera. One of those allegedly taking directions from IS has appeared in court in Sydney today, Lexi Metherall reports.
Helicopters hovered over Sydney's west just before dawn as more than 800 police swooped on a number of properties. Australia's seen big counter-terrorism raids before, but police say nothing like this. And the alleged plot they foiled would have also been unprecedented in Australia. 22-year-old Omarjan Azari from the western Sydney suburb of Guildford is the only person so far to appear in court as a result of the raids. After being arrested at 4:30 this morning, he was charged with planning a terrorist act in conspiracy with the most senior Australian involved in Islamic State, the former bouncer and bit part actor Muhammad Ali Baralai. Commonwealth prosecutor Michael Allnut told Sydney local court today the plot involved the
random selection of persons to rather gruesomely execute.
He said there was an
irrational determination to commit that plan,
because those allegedly involved continued to plot even though they knew they were under police surveillance. The charge relates to activity from May this year, well before the federal government publicly spoke about sending troops to fight IS in Iraq.
You know, it is of serious concern that right at the heart of our communities we have people that are planning to conduct random attacks, and today we've worked together to make sure that that didn't happen. We have in fact disrupted that particular attack.
As today's operation was winding down, Australia's most senior police held a press conference in Sydney. New South Wales Police Commissioner Andrew Scipione.
Right now is a time for calm. We don't need to whip this up. We actually need to let people know that they are safe, and certainly from our perspective, we know that the work this morning will ensure that all of those plans that may have been on foot have been thwarted.
There was heightened security at the court for Azari's appearance. He did not apply for bail. The prosecution opposed bail, saying there was an unusual level of fanaticism, which meant Azari would be unlikely to adhere to any court orders. His barrister, Stephen Boland, told the court police have very little evidence to support the charge, except for one phone call. The Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, was briefed on the raids last night.
There are, I regret to say, networks of people here in this country who, despite living here, despite enjoying the Australian way of life, they would do us harm. And it's very important that our police and security organisations be one step ahead of them, and I think this morning they were.
In all, 15 people were detained in the Sydney raids, none in the simultaneous raids in Brisbane. Police say today's operation has links to last week's raids, centring on an Islamic bookstore in Logan to Brisbane South. 2 men were arrested in those raids and charged with recruiting and funding foreign fighters with al-Qaeda-linked terrorist organisation Jabhat al-Nusra. At the time, police said there was no evidence they were involved in any domestic terror plot, but today it emerged new information's come to light. The Queensland Premier, Campbell Newman.
It may now be alleged that at least one individual was contemplating onshore terrorist action.
Queensland Premier Campbell Newman ending Lexi Metherall's report. Well, police in Queensland say security has been heightened at government buildings and religious centres. Stephanie Smale reports.
You do need to be aware that there are a number of people, a small number of people in our community who may wish to do us harm.
The Premier Campbell Newman fronted the media this afternoon.
That means that people do need to be vigilant. They need to also be patient and understanding that there will be additional security measures around in our state.
The state's Police Commissioner Ian Stewart says more information is coming to light.
The information that has been gathered, particularly in the last week, has been very, very concerning.
He says police are on high alert and officers have been ordered to wear their guns and carry tasers as a precaution.
I've required that all officers at all levels, where practicable, wear their accoutrements so that we are more prepared to deal with any eventuality. Now, I want to stress there is no current information about an imminent attack on any particular Queenslander or group of Queenslanders. I want to stress that. We are continuing to monitor the intelligence that's coming nationally about the activities of individuals.
Heightened security is also in place for government buildings and religious centres. Meanwhile, a Brisbane man accused of supplying funds to a terrorist organisation in Syria has been denied bail. 31-year-old Omar Sakuria is charged with collecting or making funds available to Jabhat al-Nusra between August 2013 and September 2014. He's also charged with preparing for incursions into a foreign state between February and March this year. The Assistant Director of the Commonwealth DPP opposed bail, declaring him a flight risk. The court heard details of police recordings before Mr Sakuria was arrested after the raids on an Islamic centre south of Brisbane last week. The court was told the recordings include him telling his wife early this month he had to leave the country before he was arrested. Mr Sakuria's brother and mother were mentioned in court too, the prosecutor arguing it was clear there was money in his possession and it was sent overseas with his mother. Defence barrister Peter Callaghan argued there's not enough evidence to prove Omar Sakuria collected money for Jabhat al-Nusra. Mr Callaghan also said there's no clear proof he knew it was a terror group. Mr Sakuria's solicitor Dan Rogers spoke briefly outside court.
As you've seen today, the law in these cases makes it extremely difficult for any person to be given bail. However, moving forward, Mr Sakuria is entitled to have this matter determined on objective facts rather than any current political or international events.
Brisbane solicitor Dan Rogers, ending Stephanie Smale's report. The plan to put innocent people to the sword in Australia is said to have been a directive from an Afghan-born Australian who has risen to become a senior leader in the so-called Islamic State group in the Middle East. It's understood that what triggered the operation was a phone call 2 days ago from Muhammad Ali Barialeh to Sydney to greenlight the operation. Peter Lloyd's been piecing together the backstory. He joins me in the studio. So who is Muhammad Ali Barialeh, and how sensational was this alleged plot?
Well, al-Barialeh is someone who was living in Sydney for a period of time. He's Afghan-born, but came here and was at various times an actor, a nightclub bouncer, and more lately a recruit at a senior level to the Islamic group, and is a confidant, we understand, of the leader of the Islamic group, al-Baghdadi. And it was back in, I think, June or July when al-Baghdadi issued what was interpreted as a jihad against the West in one of his rare statements. Now, this lieutenant of his, al-Barialeh, has been in contact with a number of people in Australia with whom he's associated with. That includes the young man, the 22-year-old, who's appeared in court today. 2 days ago, there was an intercept by the police of a conversation between these two where the instruction, the green light, if you like, was given to snatch people off the streets, both in Brisbane as well as Sydney, to film their deaths, whether it be beheading or shooting, somehow to identify those filmed deaths with the Islamic State flag that they have appropriated.
I saw one report that suggested they would be taken somewhere wrapped in a black flag and then beheaded.
Yes, somehow the livery, the new imagery which they have appropriated would be branded into this videotape, and that would be then transmitted back to the Middle East, to this rather, as we know now, rather sophisticated and strategic media unit that the Islamic State group operates with, and that it would be distributed on the internet at some certain point in the future. I sat down this afternoon with the acting Federal Police Commissioner, Andrew Colvin, who explained the conspiracy the police say they broke up today.
Well, we'll be alleging in court that the instructions are quite specific about that they should take up arms and they should attack members of the public, random members of the public here in Australia. We'll be alleging that that was a direction from the Middle East and that the intention was to do that fairly soon.
How recently had that instruction been made, and how was it made?
It's quite recent. We will edge a court that it's a recent telephone call. There was an exchange between a number of individuals, and the instructions were quite explicit.
Omar Azari, who is he?
Well, we'll allege in court that he's a central figure in what is a broader group, a broader conspiracy, is what we will say, to commit violent acts here. He is obviously quite pivotal. Again, it will be alleged in court, and this will be tested by the court, but he was the person who was receiving the instructions.
So the specific intention was the kidnap of a random member of the public more than once, to be taken to a location, beheaded on camera, and for that to be published.
Well, what I would say is, and I know that there's a lot of in the media talking about beheadings. I don't want to speculate about what the act would be. What I will say is we're confident that they were planning for and intending to carry out a very violent act against an individual. Now, whether that was a beheading or something less than a beheading, whether it involved kidnapping or just an act in public, it's difficult for me to say.
Of all the people arrested, only one of them has been charged and put through court. Will there be more?
Well, the investigation's ongoing, and that's what we said this morning in the press conference. One is before the court at the moment. We'll continue to collect evidence. We won't stop here. This is the first of the new phase of the investigation, and we do anticipate further arrests and further charges.
Was there a decision that had to be made, a risk assessment decision about whether or not to continue the surveillance or to move in the interests of public safety?
There was, that's right. And this is always a challenge for law enforcement, and we have to balance the need for public and community safety, which is absolutely paramount for all of us, with the need to collect as much evidence as we can and to make sure that we understand what these criminal groups are up to, and that's what they are. We acted today because we needed to intervene to protect the community.
How concerned are you about the range of age and numbers of people who are not just at the very minimum fanboys of the Islamic State group, but actually enthusiasts to the extent that they're prepared to, it seems, engage in a grotesque criminal act?
Look, I think it's fair to say we are concerned. I don't want to unnecessarily alarm the public, but we've seen that the reach of ISIL, the reach of the conflicts in the Middle East into countries like Australia, into our communities is quite strong, and it's concerning. We're seeing that younger and younger men are deciding to take up arms or wanting to participate or in some way contribute to the cause.
That's Andrew Colvin, Acting Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police. Peter Lloyd, what do we know about the 15 people who have been arrested?
Interestingly, most of them are Afghan Australians. All of them are Australian citizens, and all are people who'd had their passports cancelled, meaning they couldn't travel. So this is, to some extent, you'd imagine a frustration of purpose. If they had the ambition to go and join the Islamic State fight, they've had that taken away from them by the declaration their passports are no longer valid. So here they are marooned in Australia and looking for a cause or an action to the cause. It would appear that this is the cause they're rallying around.
The one thing that just really puzzles me is that any people in that kind of category would have had this kind of telephone call at all, given what everybody now knows.
Okay, well, I'm on a 15-minute time limit and I've only got a minute and a half to go, so I better shut up, listen to the radio and have a bit of a rant. And I'd have to say, quod erat demonstrandum. I explained months and months and months ago, if these young, malcontented Muslim adolescents are angry with life, the universe and everything, they want to go overseas and take part in the jihad, the dumbest thing you can do is to cancel their passport, stop them from going overseas and getting it out of their system, and allowing them to fester in suburbia. And all the people who were detained had had their passports cancelled. And one of them took a phone call from some inflammatory Australian, Afghan, ISIL caliphate officer. And they did it all in clear. And they've provided a marvellous spectacle for Tony Abbott's media. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.